So Kelly and I have not always had room in our life to garden, and we haven't lived out here for that long, just since we've been out here taking care of my dad, actually. But it's given us a chance to improve what was a depleted garden space that my mom and dad had used for years. So the process of adding gardening to your life is going to take some time, and it's going to provide just some really unexpected fulfillment and bonuses and frustrations. So let me show you 2 or 3 things that have been fails this year and 2 or 3 things that continue to be growing successes, I think. Kelly and I have been married, I think, 46 years, and it's a blessing. And the blessing that has showed up that has been sort of increasingly obvious to me is that she loves sunflowers. You can't kill sunflowers. They will volunteer after the first year you plant them, and this sunflower captures the essence of my wife's personality perfectly. Beyond that, she's planted zinnias at the end of the tomato rows. And so the first thing that I want to mention that has come to me recently about gardening is add a little color. And if you want, throw in a sunflower, and if you do, think of Kelly. So I don't know if you've seen this garden before, but this is what it looks like in the first week of August. Midsummer, pretty much. Everything is fruited and ripening. I mean, the fruit is set and the ripening is happening. And the big deal in our garden is tomatoes, because we love tomatoes. We have indeterminate, which are the great big tall ones. They will grow until frost and keep producing. We have determinate varieties, which grow to a certain size, a certain height, set and ripen their fruit and die. And it's just a mix. We've got about 6 species in here, and they all seem to be very happy. This is one of the reasons that they're happy, is because of this watering pipe that I made. We'll talk about that and I'll give you some details. But the bonus with this tomato watering system is that it's a little water feature. You can hear the fountain trickling when you're sitting on the patio. And the tomatoes don't like to be sprinkled. They like to be watered at ground level. It helps. The zinnias I mentioned, more tomatoes, cherry tomatoes. We tried not to get those, but sometimes tomatoes are mislabeled. A row of basil. Basil's going to seed, but Kelly just clips that off, plucks the leaves. She has basil for the whole neighborhood. By the way, that's one of the benefits of having a garden. You can share the produce. You can share with your friends what Mother Earth is sharing with you. And it's just, what a win. Now, we're about to see a fail. You see these straw bales? We did a video of putting these straw bales in, and I've been embarrassed to put it up because I conditioned these bales, I put them in, I watered them, I soaked them, I checked their temperature, and when the temperature was back down, I poked holes in there, and I dropped in seed potatoes, but not really seed potatoes. They were just Yukon Gold out of a bag at the grocery store that I hadn't allowed to sprout a little bit. They didn't germinate. Fail. We'll deal with that in the fall. These are pumpkins. They're white pumpkins. They're white pumpkins because my grandson Leo had a white jack-o'-lantern last fall. He saved the seeds. He said, "Papa, can you put these in your garden?" He sprouted the plant, we planted them, and away they went. Is that beautiful? You know, whether or not it's practical, it's a thing of beauty. And then the corn. We have 3 different ages. It's tasseling. When these things die, when these tassels die, they say the corn's ripe. I'm about to start checking. In fact, let's check right now and see how close these are to being eared out. Oh, they're not even close. Where's a bigger one? Nowhere near. Give it a week. It'll be delicious. So this first 40% was all one age, and then there's a couple rows that are younger, so the corn will ripen, you know, maybe a week behind. And then there's 3 rows that are way younger. So we should have corn until we're sick of it, actually, but that's what you want. And then Kelly couldn't help it. She had to finish up with sunflowers, a volunteer tomato. So let's go down the list of things that worked, and I'll show you the other thing that didn't. A couple of things down here. This is a volunteer tomato. It was just a transplanted tomato seed that got ground into the fill in the rototilling process. I think it's actually going to bear fruit, but I also think it's probably a cherry tomato that nobody's very excited about. But you got to admire the resilience and the toughness of seeds, right? Planting seeds or letting seeds plant themselves it's a lesson in tenacity, or it can be for me. I've got some little pepper plants here. we kind of shaded them out with the corn. That was bad judgment. I don't know if we're going to get peppers here or not. Maybe not. Doesn't matter. But the win is, for the first time I came clear down to the end and did my thing with paper and wood chips. And the paper now is gone. But the paper and the wood chips have shaded out the weeds and the grass down here. And it makes a more civilized appearance. And it makes it easier to pull the weeds when you pull them. So I'm a fan of wood chips as a way to get ahead of the battle against the weeds. So I've continued with the wood chips so that the weeds don't spill out of the end of the corn row. But I don't worry too much about the weeds in between the corn because they're fighting for light. But let me just show you that even though they're fighting for light, they're doing pretty good over here. I don't know what this weed is, but it is a toughie. I don't know if you've got that at your house, but it gets big. But I've got enough water in the ground and the soil's been amended enough that they pull easy. I'm going to use this antique hoe and just chop a few out. I'm going to try to get a grandkid in here doing this in a big way. Frankly, I don't think the corn cares. I don't think that the weeds are actually going to reduce the corn crop. But it just is nice to be able to discipline these things a little bit. So we've got good weed control along here. The grass from the yard keeps trying to crawl up, but that's easy enough to just kind of knock back. And a lot of you have suggested and recommended and, you know, enthusiastically endorsed the idea of no-till gardening and chop and drop. Put the cover crop on, chop it off, leave it on the ground, plant through it. And I've seen the successes, and I like it. But with that little Kubota tractor, it's just not that much work to till. And frankly, for us, with our garden in our yard, it looks better. It looks more regulated to do it in rows and, you know, to till and mulch. So I think we're going to keep on with that for the foreseeable future. Now back here, you come to the other fail this year. We shifted our attention away from the raspberries. We pruned them incorrectly last fall. I took down a couple of the wires, and so they're spilling out. I haven't put enough water on them. The raspberry collapse this year is nobody's fault but mine. We also made the mistake when we began to put the patch in of getting some other berry types in here, which in and of themselves are delicious. I mean, there's a thornless blackberry, and they're big and they're delicious. But we're transplanting them out by the chickens, and they get water every time we water the chickens. We've decided to kind of get away from a rainbow herd in the raspberry patch. Okay, so here it is in the tomato patch with mint compost over the paper. And years ago, this grass would have gotten ahead of the tomatoes and was hard to pull. And now the soil's soft enough and there's enough moisture trapped in there that when a weed does get a toehold, it's easy enough to yard him out. So if you've noticed, here we are, first week of August, and all you see is green tomatoes. That's because they're slow to ripen this year. They've put on lots of greenery. We've picked and eaten probably 30 tomatoes. Should have been 100 by now. So these plants have gotten so big and bushy. The rows are 5 feet apart this way, 4 feet apart this way to coincide with my watering pipe. Kelly came through here with her hedge trimmer and just trimmed off these leaders that are getting out into the row. So it became more accessible, more friendly for picking, and I'm hoping that it stresses the plants just a little bit and they shift their attention from putting on leaves to ripening the fruit, enlarging and ripening the fruit that's set. That's one of about 3 ways to do that. You can cut off water to stress the plant so they ripen. You can clip the ends of the leaders to stress the plant so they ripen. Or some people take a shovel and plunge it around the plant to clip off the end of some roots. And either way, the plant gets the idea. The situation is deteriorating, ripen these tomatoes. So, looks good, works good. I'm a little intimidated by how many tomatoes I'm going to have to start eating. So the question is, how do you keep these things watered? How do you have a well-watered garden? Which is for centuries been a metaphor for things that are squared away. Well, there are three things that we have sort of gotten down to that keep the garden and the yard well enough watered. The first of them is my pressurized drip system 2-inch PVC pipe with little cross pieces glued in so it doesn't turn over, and 1/8-inch diameter holes, 4 inches on center. I put 6 holes at each 4-foot location to coincide with my layout, and I didn't have enough flow from my creek pump to get the water out far enough. So I took roofing screws and plugged 2 of the 1/8-inch holes at each location, and now 4 holes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 24 1/8-inch diameter holes arcs out to just the right distance for watering these plants. I think it's a win. This year I've started putting that in the corn too, because once the corn gets so tall, you can put a rainbird on it and sprinkle it from the top all you want and the water never gets to the ground. So I drag this thing up and down the rows, up and down the garden, once a week. The other rainbird application is for the pumpkins and the basil, and I just let it run round and round and round and round about every 3rd day or so, and so far everybody's happy. But the real labor reducer has been something called Tractor Man. Let me show you this little treasure. It was 4 years ago, and my brother was out here visiting, and he said, "Man, you guys are sure having to move those sprinklers around your yard. The yard's big. Kelly loves to mow it, but it's hard to keep it green in the summer." He said, "Have you ever seen a Tractor Man?" And well, the answer to that was no. And he told me about this guy. This one's made by Orbit. And this one, after 4 or 5 years, finally quit. But what's happening is the water pressure turns the sprinkler, spreads the water, and turns these wheels incrementally, slowly, about like the hands of a clock. You can set it to either the high-speed setting, the neutral setting where it will stay in one spot, or a low-speed setting, and it just crawls across the lawn, however long your hose is. And this hose is 150 feet. Now, let me show you one of the adjustments that you can make, which is to tilt these things up or down in order to throw the water further or closer. When I set this up, 20 minutes ago, I have it not going far enough. So I tip it up a little bit, tip this up a little bit. We all get back out of the spray of the water. And when I let this go, it starts to whirl, and now the water will cover a wider diameter. I always get a little wet when I play with Tractor Man. Look at that. And it just does its job, pulls itself wherever you want it to go, and every so often you come out and just pick up some of the hose that it's pulling along behind so it doesn't lose traction. It's a win. The condition of the soil to begin with was just pure black mud, which is a terrible clay that can only be, it has to have the right moisture to even be able to till it. It's either baked into adobe or it's just a sticky, gooey ball of slime that can't be tilled, and so it was hard to even put a garden in. So when we moved out here, we started putting tons, and I do mean tons, of organic material in. Leaves primarily, some wood chips, grass clipping, some horse manure, which brought in a whole bunch of weeds. It's now a weed bank, all right? But we deal with that with the mulch over the top. But the way we have really started amending this soil is with the cover crop every fall, which is planted, the crimson clover, and so it just, I like it. Looks like it's working. But if you have clay soil, you have a problem. The other thing we've figured out is that since we can't plant until we're safe from frost, which is middle of May. This year we waited till Memorial Day, which made everything late. But if you can't plant early enough to utilize the whole summer, then you do what Kelly started doing, and that is planting on the back porch or a greenhouse. Put the seeds in and get them sprouted, especially the corn. Then you're putting in corn plants instead of corn seeds, and the corn is ahead of the weed race. So, seedlings in the house, organics in the soil, figuring out how to get enough water and not too much water, This has all been key here in Southern Oregon, and probably if you're anywhere near our latitude, you know, where it's not a long growing season, maybe some of those ideas would be helpful for you. So I may have mentioned, but I want to mention now, that one of the values of a garden, particularly if you have kids or grandkids, are the things that the garden can teach if you have the eyes to see it and the ears to hear it. And this poor Gravenstein apple tree, I never got out here to thin the apples when they were setting on. It's just got such a heavy crop this year, it's going to tear itself apart if I don't brace up some of these limbs. But it's the abundance of nature. It's the beauty of this perfectly created world, this little spaceship for us that is so exquisitely designed and executed. And I'm thinking of Marcus Aurelius right now, and I'll quote him badly. But the concept of this piece of wisdom was that there are about 3 different kinds of men, and I'll say people, in the world. There's the man who will do you a good turn and expect you to do him a good turn right back. And there's the man who will do you a good turn and he may not expect you to repay with a favor or an act of service, but he'll never forget that he did something for you. And then there's a third kind. The third kind of person is the one who goes about in their life doing good for others as spontaneously and naturally as a bee makes the honey, or a dog pursues the chase, or a grapevine bears its fruit, or an apple tree bears so much fruit with no thought of compensation, just doing what it is that it does to the best of its ability, never thinking of compensation, never thinking of being repaid. That's the kind of man I want to be. And it's a lesson that is best taught in a garden. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman. And keep up the good work.